Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's Chord-o-class. Each week, I meet with a bunch of patrons. We talk limited magic, we talk strategy. This week, we're talking Streets and New Capenna, specifically rules of engagement for the format, draft navigation after the format's been out for a few days now. So come along for the ride, check out what we talked about. If you want to be part of the next class, you want to take part in the activities, we do a bunch of fun activities. Check out the link down below. It's got the Patreon link. You can sign up there. And yeah, let's just jump in. All right, welcome everybody to Chord-o-class number 7, the second one for Streets of New Capenna. Today we are talking about rules of engagement and navigation for the format. So I know we are still kind of just at the very beginning of the format still. So we're going to have kind of varying levels of people's experiences. And, I want to accommodate for all of that. But I think it's a good place to start off today. Kick off the weekend. I'm sure a few of you are going to do a few drafts this weekend with some rules of engagement, and a big picture topic that I think a lot of people have been asking about is navigation. How do you actually navigate into the right lane? How do I know what's open? How do I figure out what should I be drafting at the table? Do I draft a 2-color, 3-color, 4-color deck? We're going to get into all of that today. Before we start, of course, our little agenda here. Got our short intro, a little bit of a group discussion. Got one breakout activity and a regroup, and I think we'll have time for the second one. The first breakout activity should be pretty short, so will not take the majority of the time, I think. So, I'm just going to start and say, throw it to the class here. How have the streets been for everybody? How many drafts are you in? What's your experiences been? Maybe some of you have watched, maybe some of you have played a little bit more than watched, maybe vice versa. But first impressions now that we've actually seen the actual set in action?
First impressions was I played the F&M last night, and the Naya colors are really big, and because of Blitz, they actually grind better than I expected them to.
Yeah, that's a good. So you mentioned two things I want to touch on actually. Big, keyword big. Creatures in this format are pretty small in general, which isn't always an inherently bad thing. Right? There's ways to pump them. There's ways to leverage a bunch of small creatures, but certainly something to keep in mind, especially when you're thinking about like breakpoints and powers and toughness, magic numbers and all of that. But two, yeah, a lot of the aggro decks are. I mean, I think it's kind of what we've seen in the past little while with good aggro decks, that they have the ability to grind, right? They're not just I play my 1, 2, 3. If you have 2 removal spells, I lose, right? There's a lot of ways through Blitz, through just like a lot of grindy cards. Warm Welcome is kind of a card that's a little bit grindy. The 3-mana instant, put a 1/1 on the field, look for a creature in the top 5. A lot of little cards like that. So yeah, totally, I totally agree with that. Anyone else?
So I've done 4 drafts on Arena so far, and one trophy. So hey,
nice.
One that the servers crashed, and I lost about all of pack 3. Got to 5 wins, so that's kind of.
I was gonna say that's kind of that's a humble brag there, right? You still did pretty well.
No, I think one thing that's interesting is this kind of the relative balance compared to some of the other formats. I mean, I think if anybody's watched Alex's stream, you've seen the power of like some of the red black blitz stuff. But my one trophy was with like a blue white flyers tempo thing.
Nice.
And so that there's like blitz does definitely give me, I think you mentioned a couple times, like that just feeling of like, oh, I'm doing it.
Yep.
Which is awesome. But like you absolutely can build strong decks in all of the families if you're kind of flexible.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of funny. The initial data, which we might get into talking a little bit at this point, the initial data for 17 lands has come out with some pretty telling things, and there seems to be imbalance ish in the colors, where the Gruul color pairs, the Naya and the Cabaretti and what's the other Nervatiers or Jund, whatever the name by, are underperforming. I think that, like you were saying, though, I felt it's been a bit more balanced than what the data might imply. Small sample size and all, of course. I think we're going to see, and this is just a little bit of a forward, I just want to get this thought out. I think we're going to see in 17 lands, because there's non-obvious ways to build decks, or I guess I should say, the way you should be building decks is not obvious, whether that be 2-color, 3-color, 4-color, whether that be, what synergies should you be going after in those 2-color, 3-color, 4-color pairs, because there's a lot of different synergies you could be going for. I think that I'm a little bit hesitant to unlike some sets where I'd be like, oh yes, this is a pretty simple, clear-cut set. The data is going to be hard to obscure. I think it's a little bit more. I'm willing to give some credence to, well, this color is underperforming, but let's give it some time. Let's see how it shakes out. This set is primed me to be thinking, okay, I think there's enough going on here. There's enough complexity. I don't think looking at the stats is going to be the end-all be-all. So just a primary thought.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to build the different families and two-color pairs, and so like the top-level like color pair data seems hard to read, but like I'm still really interested in kind of individual cards.
Yes, totally. Yeah, that is a big thing, right? I do think individual cards, it's hard to obscure how well an individual card is doing, right? I should have specified. I'm talking more how well each deck is doing for sure. But yes, individual cards, I think it's a little bit more telling. Anyways, let's oh, sorry. Actually, does anybody have any other thoughts that they wanted to get out, or if not?
I've been prioritizing lands early, which has kind of like kept me open, but it also makes a lot of decision points a lot harder. Because now you see a 3-color card and you're like, oh, I could play that, but it's not on my like first 4 picks game plan, but that's such a great card. I feel like I want to get it. So that's been a lot of interesting navigation.
Right, exactly. That's a key navigational question where it's just like, well, I mean, is this a good enough card? Should I be going for the 4th color? Right? I think that's been a big thing for me, and I think for other people as well. So let's just get into our first activity here. So we did this for Kamigawa, for anybody who's in the Kamigawa class. We're going to do a rules of engagement activity here. So for each group here, I think we're going to have about 2 groups of 4 or 5 in each group. Come up with 2 rules of engagement, maybe 3 if you want. I just said 2 as a preliminary number, but I don't want to limit you at all. 2 rules of engagement to share with the class once you come back. They can be about the draft, about the gameplay, big picture ideas, just format feelings in general. For those who aren't familiar with this terminology, we just talk about rules of engagement as, if your friend came up to you and it was their first F&M at the format, maybe we're thinking 3 weeks down the line here, right? And they're like, well, what's this format all about? And you had to give them like the sales pitch, the 2-minute sales pitch. You say, well, to do well in this format, you have to work within these parameters, right? Make sure you're prioritizing this. Make sure you do this, that kind of stuff, right? And, it can be specifics, could be big picture stuff. Kind of just want to leave it up to you. And yeah, I think this really is a great activity, especially this early on, to help frame just as you're jumping into a draft, it's really hard to, you have 17 lands, you can look at some tier lists and stuff, but actually knowing, well, does this idea I have work within the parameters of this format, right? I might be going a little bit off track here, but does this still work with what makes this format tick? So I'm going to give you guys all, let's say 10, 15 minutes. Let's say we'll be back here at 12:25 or 25 after, because we're not all in the same time zone. So yeah, 25 after, approximately. And yeah, I already, for those 2 people that I designated rooms to or asked, volunteered for putting up the rooms, you can put them either here or in the Discord under Chord-o-class. And yeah, I'll see you all in 15 minutes or so.
20 minutes later.
All right, let's see.
Yeah, a lot of discussion.
I made a little, Google Doc, and we had about 5 things that I took down, and they were all at varying levels of certainty, I guess.
Oh, nice. Okay, sweet. So, okay, well, I mean, Zach, since you spoke up, why don't you go first?
Okay. The first thing was that it seems like you really want to like find your lane, stay open and find a lane. Classic draft the hard way, yes. I guess, because there is a lot of power, especially in some of the multicolor cards, both the 2 and 3 color multicolor cards, and you can really just like collect all of them if you are in that open pair. So that's a big one in the draft. Then we had it seems like it's much more of a pockets of synergy rather than like macro synergies. There's no deck where I want to just like collect everything with keyword X. Even though we've talked about Blitz being good, but like it is much more that like you find these little 3-4 card pairs, whether it's Blitz and Fake Your Own Death. Duncan mentioned Sam Black doing something sick with what was that one?
Graphene Silencer and Dig Up the Body.
Yeah. Just like looping that to repeatedly kill things, and so that was a big one. And then I guess probably number 1 thing was just like tempo is kind of like king. Really, no matter what you're trying to do, you do need to like use your mana efficiently.
Yes, big time. So the first thing you mentioned with the navigation, I'm going to touch on a little bit myself here as some of my own rules, but let's talk about the other points you mentioned. Macro versus micro synergy. So for those, who, again, may not be familiar with this kind of, the terminology or phrasing it this way, it is basically just saying, if you think of cycling in Ikoria or Decade in Midnight Hunt, like these decks are just like all in. I just want to take everything with this mechanic on it, right? That's like a macro synergy deck where it's like your entire deck is pushed towards one thing in the draft. You just want this one thing. And then like the micro synergies are more like, what Zach was talking about, where you got these 2-card combos, Blitz plus Fake Your Own Death, or Girder Goons. Yeah. Well, Girder Goons is a Blitz card, but yeah, Girder Goons plus Fake Your Own Death
by itself.
Sorry, say again.
Girder Goons is just a combo by
itself.
Yes,
that is a combo by itself. There's you don't need much help with that card, but like finding these small little interactions, and you'll come to within each color pair or each deck, you'll be like, oh, I know these are the combos in the deck that I'm kind of looking to piece together, right? That's kind of the vibe. I have felt maybe that Blitz, like Blitz plays well with other Blitz is one thing, and like Connive, you can have a full-on Connived, no, sorry, not Connive, the Casualty. You can have a full-on Casualty deck where you're just like, I know I'm sack fodder and sack outlets, the Casualty cards. I feel there's been some of that, but for the most part, yeah, I think as you're drafting, that's not your main, that's not going to be the most common thing you're doing. It's going to be more those little pockets of synergy. And the last thing you mentioned, tempo. Yeah, that's a big one. So for anybody who's played a multicolor set before, and I think even if you haven't, you've probably heard some people talking about this on podcasts or streams and stuff. Multicolor sets tend to be a bit slower. They tend to be like a little bit more plotting, a little bit more, okay, like give each player a little bit of time to set up their mana so that they can like actually cast their spells. Hasn't really felt like that, honestly. It's kind of been like, it's the same thing we've seen in the last little while, where it's like, if you don't play a 2, you kind of start to fall a little bit behind, and then, I guess the way I would describe it is if you don't play a 2 and your opponent hits you for 3 on turn 3 or something, the board starts to feel very tense, and you feel like maybe you've played a 3, maybe you've played a 4, but one thing goes wrong, and it's just like, oh, it's game over. Your opponent casts one well-timed removal spell, or they cast the Rooftop Nuisance to tap down your 2 things. You're just like, I can never come back from this, right? So that pushes a few things, right? That pushes, 1, good curve, making sure you've got enough 2s and 3s, making sure you're not going tap land, right? But 2, one thing I've really focused on is making sure that my 4s and 5s stabilize me really well. Like making sure that they come down and either do something immediately or are able to help me turn the corner some way after I've fallen behind a little bit. So one of the ways this manifests is in Sparta's Adjudicator, which is the Bant family fixer. The 4/4 comes down, locks something down for a turn. That card is much better than the rest of the cycle of the family 3-color common fixers, because that one actually has a really large impact when it comes down. It stabilizes you when you're a little bit behind, maybe pushes an advantage when you're a little bit ahead. The Rakish Revelers is another one that's pretty close. The 5/3 that comes in with the 1/1. That one's an okay one. Not doesn't stabilize you quite as well, but to some extent. And then the other ones, they don't do such a good job, or they're very expensive, right? So that is, just the fact that those 2 are the best of the bunch, the Revelers and the Adjudicators, I think points towards the importance of stabilizing, having some sort of stabilizing play on 5. Another one that I want to point out is the 3/5, the Ballroom Dancers. I don't remember the Ballroom Dancers that when they attack, they 2 things, it and something else gets lifelink or first strike. That's the kind of card that I think, usually I'm like, it's like a 5-mana card, comes down, doesn't do that much. Well, Ballroom Brawlers, that's it, thank you. It does block pretty well when it comes down, and the lifelink is really, really hard to race, especially if your opponent's been like blitzing early and just like, okay, well, they've gotten you down to 8 and then you start attacking, gaining 5, 6, 7 life. So yeah, like that's a good example of a card that I think has really impressed me. So just looking for your 4 and 5 mana cards to catch you up, as I think is a big thing. Yeah. Anything else from your group?
We had more, but I was gonna give the other group a chance to.
I think that's a good idea. Other group, you wanna share your thoughts?
Yeah, we came up with a few things.
Sweet.
We came up with kind of like speaking to the tempo thing, being proactive. Figured avenues of attacking this format are like to be big, like with green creatures, to be fast with blitz, or just be evasive with the flyers.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured it's better to be proactive in this format, and with splashing and controlling decks in this format, it seems harder to be reactive, because of the tempo things, and you have to have things that catch you up, and there really aren't too many things that catch you up immediately besides like uncommons and rares. So if you're gonna go to the avenue, you have to like construct your deck very well in that fashion, and like have 2 drops to also like have these speed bumps to bridge you into that game, that mid to late game.
Yep.
So it seems like a very fine line of it's just better to be proactive than reactive.
Yeah, I think for the most part that's certainly true. Like I think I'm looking for reasons to be reactive deck or a deck that wants to get to the late game, and so far my experience has been if you open some awesome rare, like a Titan of Industry or something. But I think that the even the casualty decks, right? Like the decks that are ostensibly looking to play some fodder early, looking to play Cormello loops and stuff like that and grinding. I've actually found I was building my decks like that, where I was like pretty reactive, a bunch of removal, and then what I found in my games though was I've built them this way, but really what I want to do with these decks and actually the way that I'm closing out games easier is I'm just playing like a somewhat defensive 2 that I was hoping to like block with, but then I was like, oh, I'm just gonna attack with it. And then I'm actually just like tempoing them out a bit more often than I would have expected, rather than grinding them out, right? Where I've had games where I've like done wild like dig up the body Cormello loops for sure, but I'd say half my games have just been like snooping Newsy, which is the blue-black 2-drop on 2, into like some other creature, and I'm just using my removal spells to just get in with those, right? So I think yeah, just if you can be proactive, that's great to be able to do that. If you are going to be reactive, you need specific tools. Like you need to make sure you have the really good defensive tools, like Graphene Silencer, which is the card we mentioned before. Let's see if we can find it here. It's the 3-mana card, connives, and then gives something negative X when it dies. You kind of have to have those kind of cards as really good defensive cards, or just like a bunch of really cheap interaction spells. There it is right there. Sorry. Yeah, that kind of stuff. It's not the default, right? I think proactive is the default. And I actually really like what you said, Adrian, about like how are you attacking the format? How are you pushing some sort of advantage? Flyers. The blue-white flyer deck has been a big one that I've really liked. Or you're attacking with blitz creatures. It's another really big one. I think those are like the 2 big ones, honestly. Blitz and flyers. Those are the big, like, if I can do one of those 2 things, I feel like my core of my deck is really good. Anything else?
And another thing, we were talking about decks, like the guy saying they had success with red, black, and blue, white.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like those colors operate very well as 2-color combinations, while something like blue, black seems like you're more likely need to flash a third color to give it more power and oomph, while red, black, and blue, white can exist as very fine, consistent 2-color shells. And I think that affects draft navigation a lot.
Big time. Yes, that's really, really good point. I think I totally agree with that. Where I've had really good just 2-color. I think my first trophy in this format was just a red-black deck. It was awesome. I think one of my latest trophies have been just blue-white decks. Those have been awesome. I think green-white is another color pair that can do pretty well as just a 2-color deck. And green-white being a good 2-color deck and blue-white being a good 2-color deck is, I think, why we're seeing Bance be an overperformer currently in the data. So yeah, I think that's huge for draft navigation. Sorry, there's a comment in the one more. Oh, yeah, it's, another one from the chat here. So, be prepared to calculate some unexpected interactions. Yes, I've been on stream lately. I've had a lot of moments where I've been like, just like honestly, just like dumbstruck, just like sitting there and like, let me think through this. How is this gonna work? Hold on a second. If I loop my Cormella, my Fake Your Own Death does come back here, and then my opponent did this weird thing. It's I found the gameplay, like the draft is one thing, right? But then the gameplay in this format, I've just found to be, obviously it's a new format. We're going to come, it's going to be weird interactions you're not used to. But there's been so many times I'm like, hold on a second. How does that card interact with this card? So yeah, there's been a lot of that for me. Yeah, the Magpie, yeah, with that's a good one. With Ligrella.
The other one we talked about a little bit was just always having to play around Blitz.
Yes.
Is intense too. Just like knowing that your opponent can come back with 7-8 damage so quickly with one removal and one Blitz creature can turn around the entire game. And it's sometimes just always having that in the back of your head.
Yeah, I think one of the things is often you think in formats when you're at a low life total, you're like, well, how many high haste creatures are there in this format? And you're like, maybe there's like one or two I shouldn't play. There's like a million haste creatures in this format, right? Like you have to play around haste creatures in this format because there's not a million, but there's a good number of common, right? They're just naturally built in. So you shouldn't feel safe at 5 life or whatever. Leave back one extra blocker if you can. Is something I've been doing. Yeah, so great. Let's move on to just some of my rules of engagement here. Just move us along here. So I focused on draft navigation just to keep it succinct. But I found if kind of like what everybody was saying here, just to touch on this, stay in fewer colors if you can early on. If you can take a Girder Goons or an Inspiring Overseer over a gold card, great. Take those awesome cards. If you can take a 2-color card over a 3-color card, great. Take those awesome cards. Now, it gets tricky when you're like, ooh, a Corpse Appraiser or a Disciplined Duelist. Those cards are awesome. Do I take those? I've been leaning towards no. And it's not always no, but leaning towards it, where it's like, I'll take a card of fewer colors if I can, just because the flexibility is so important. And I found that, wrapping up everything we've been saying into one point here, it's good to, you have to make sure you're casting your cards on curve, making sure you're not falling behind. More colors in your cards means it's going to be harder to do that. So just like sticking to 2 colors is often better, or 2.5 colors. So it's really for me been the trajectory of, oh, this is a multicolor set. Let's just like see how many gold cards I can shove in my deck, and then just like dialing it back and be like, no, let me just take this monocolor card. No, let me just take this monocolor card. Let me just take a monocolor card. And then after you kind of see what's open, because that's another thing too, where it's like, I'll take the monocolor cards early. And then once you get to the picks like 6, 7, 8 of the draft, 9 of the wheel, there's gonna be multicolor cards in the pack, and you can take them there, and then you're kind of a bit more comfortable being like, okay, I'm gonna see more of these multicolor cards in the future. I think the problem with taking the multicolor cards early is you're kind of just like, it's a shot in the dark. Who knows if you're gonna see a green white gold cards or advanced gold cards later, and then it's very, very hard to jam a Disciplined Duelist into your like red black base deck or whatever. You just can't do that, right? So when you can in the draft, within reason, stay monocolor, dual color if you can. I think it's really important to know what cards to add colors for it though. So I've had decks where I'm like, very solidly good blue-white deck, right? But then I see a Disciplined Duelist, and I'm like, well, that's a really, really good card. That's actually one of the best cards in, one of the best gold cards. I pick that up. Maybe I take it over, a Windrake, or like, when it was a decent flyer, a decent role player. I'm like, this is good. Worth speculating on. Crew Captain, not so much, right? And if you aren't privy to exactly what is a good multicolor card yet, or not a good one, that's where 17 lands can come in and kind of really give you a easy, cheat sheet of just like, okay, that one's way worse than I thought, or maybe this one's better than I thought. Crew Captain's not one where I'd be like, oh, I'm in red-black? Ooh, Crew Captain, maybe I could pick that up and play it. Not anywhere on the same level of Disciple. So kind of, I think as the format matures a bit, figuring out exactly what those cards are to add a second or third color for is important. And another thing is, I think take lands early, but not too early. So as I've kind of drafted this format a little bit more, I've noticed because I'm kind of transitioning 1 color to 2 color to 3 color in my drafts, and sometimes that doesn't go past 2 colors. I've noticed that the lands I would take them early and then go, hey, I actually don't need this many lands in my deck, or I'm not playing them at all actually sometimes, or it's just like I didn't, I speculated on a land here and it didn't pan out. Not to say it's not still good to speculate on lands when, I think it's still good to take them over replacement level cards, or even slightly above replacement level cards. It's good to take them when you have an inkling that you're like, okay, I'm blue-black, I should take this Maestro Theater, especially because I might splash a red card, especially because, maybe you're in a color combination that is likely to splash, right? You're like, okay, if I'm red-black, I'm a little less likely to take a dual land than if I'm like white-blue, because I think white-blue picks up some pretty good green gold cards, like the Duelist, like Lagrella, the Magpie, that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff you're going to figure out as you go on a little bit more. But yeah, I've been increasingly less impressed by like I don't think you want to first pick a land if you can. I mean, it's okay too. It's still not a horrendous first pick, but in some formats you would do that. Some multicolored formats. I think this format pushes you a little bit away from that for the reasons that we talked about, tempo being so important, but also the mana bases are set up in such a way where 5-color decks are a little bit tougher than let's just like 3-color or 2-color decks or 4-color decks, like because you only have you got allied and enemy lands if you count the theater and this cycle the fetch lands, but it's still there's still some kinks in getting that perfect mana to get good 4 or 5 color mana bases. So it's not just super simple. So yeah, I've just been lowering the lands slightly in my pick order. And maybe this is coming from a place of me being predisposed to think, oh, lands are super high picks in multicolored cards. Maybe you, if you have not drafted a ton of multicolor sets, you're like, okay, well, I valued them. I heard people say I should value them this level of high, and maybe maybe you haven't quite gotten there in the draft yet because the set's only been out for 2 days, and maybe you don't have to readjust so far back down. But from my perspective, if you've heard how highly I'd wanted to take lands in the past, talking about this set, I think I've shifted down just a little bit. So just some examples here. Good 2-color deck here. Good, nice. This is my first trophy, I think. It was just a good 2-color red-black deck. I think one of the things is you kind of want to figure out. Let's just go back here quickly. When you're figuring out should you move into more colors, it's more for me. It's been can I take a monocolor card, and if I can't, then I take a gold card, right? And once you approach a certain power level that's too low of the monocolor card, then you go, okay, I'll speculate on a powerful gold card or powerful 2-color card, and then it goes, well, if I can't take a powerful 2-color card, I take a powerful 3-color card, right? It's kind of like this threshold you meet of not a good enough monocolor card, take a gold card. Not good enough of a gold card, take a 3-color card. Or I guess those are gold cards, but you know what I mean, right? So if I have a good lane where I just have a good 2-color deck, I often don't find myself needing to go to that direction, right? Now I have a 3-color deck here where I'm just I'm blue-black, splashing some red cards. This was out of necessity, sort of, because I was like, hey, I'm not getting enough blue-black, just good cards. I need to reach into a 3rd color. And the nice thing is, this does happen naturally, I think. You're going to feel this naturally, where you're almost like you're drafting any other set, where you're like, hey, I'm getting cut out of my colors here. I need to take cards of another color. It's sort of the same vibe, where it's like, hey, I'm getting cut out of being able to play a good 2-color deck. Let me move up to a 3-color deck, right? And you're just it's not gonna be like you're struggling. It's gonna be like, oh, I'm seeing 3-color cards or 2-color cards of different colors. Let me take those, and I can make a deck out of that somehow, right? So, and then going further, this was a draft where I had this wild deck here where I wasn't seeing very many good monocolor cards. I had these 3 Jewel Thieves. That was a great base, right? But then I was like, the only thing I'm seeing here are good gold cards. And so when you only see good gold cards, you kind of have to make that work. Then you go take the good gold cards, and then maybe you do the prioritize lands super, super highly. You go okay, cool. Now I can take all the dual lands, which I did here, right? And that worked out pretty well. So I don't want to give sweeping generalizations, and anything I'm saying here has just been my experience. I'm not saying this is the roadmap to the format as we go forward, right? But it's been, for me, this space of multicolor great good stuff here has been more out of necessity than something I actively want to do, I think. Any thoughts on that before we move on to our second group activity?
I have questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First question is, have you found the games coming down to big rares or Bombay rares and uncommons, or do you think the set is pauper, peasant, or a prince format?
Good question. I think it's mostly been decided by commons and uncommons. Just like in any format, you're gonna have a lot of rares that are just busto. Your opponent casts an Ob Nixilis or a Vivian, and you're like, okay, well that's a huge pain. But I really on the spectrum of Crimson Vow to Neon Dynasty, very much similar to Neon Dynasty, I think. And I've played, I don't know, quite a few games at this point. I think I'm probably in close to the 100 game range. I haven't felt oh, this game's been really, really close, and then, oh, my opponent slammed that bomb, and now the door is just closed. I can point to a few games, 5, 6, 7, that stand out in my mind, but I really haven't felt that most of my decks have been, or most of my drafts have been about that. Also, if you're drafting proactively, playing proactively, that naturally happens less, right? You're naturally just going to be, in a position where, if you're being proactive, the game's start with your opponent maybe being at 12 or whatever. And when I say proactive, I don't necessarily mean aggro. I just mean kind of a deck like this where I've got a bunch of good 2s and 3s. You can leverage an early board presence into beating a bomb easier. if you're not doing that, maybe you're like super, well, if you're super reactive, then you ideally have answers, right? But you can definitely, if you are a reactive deck, you can end up in spots where it's just like, okay, they were ahead on board and then they played their bomb and slammed the door, right? Where if you're like doing stuff like, this or this, just any of my decks here, especially this, the bombs don't matter as much. It's kind of funny. There's a lot of Wraths in the set, a lot of field wipes. I actually haven't felt it too much more than any other set. Like, I haven't been like Wrathed a million times, I felt. I've just been like, oh yeah, like, this is about par for the course. I got Wrathed here. That's fine. It's annoying, but whatever. And the thing is, too, I also haven't felt like the Wraths have been too bad. They haven't been too backbreaking, in the sense that I haven't been like, well, they Wrath and now I die. Because I have Blitz creatures, right? Blitz creatures bring you back from Wrath so nicely. I have just a bunch of value stuff where it's just like, all right, well, it's just like, so cool, they Wrath me, and now I bring back a bunch of stuff from my grave. Or I'm just like, maybe my card quality is high enough that every one of my draw steps after the Wrath is just going to be good. So, Wraths are a subcategory of rares that are very obnoxious to play against, but I haven't actually found them to be too bad. And overall, yeah, have found mostly the games have been about commons and uncommons.
One thing I think I heard you and some other content creators say about Neo was like, if you just pick and play the good cards, they're naturally going to play together nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found that in this format too, or do you have to sort of change your pick order to pick cards that's synergize better?
Yeah, good question. I think it's mostly, especially early on when people don't quite know the great cards just yet, or the good cards, or going to sneaky good cards. I've been just taking the good cards because I've been able to take the good cards, where it's just like, I don't really have many, at the end of Neo, I definitely felt, and I'm sure most people felt this, are just like, you get to pick 6, 7, you're like, wow, this pack just doesn't have anything, right? And you're like, you have to be a little bit creative. You're like, well, this has a little bit of synergy with my deck. Maybe I can make this work in my deck. Haven't felt that just yet. I've just been taking good cards for the most part, but I imagine it's probably going to change as the weeks go on. Yeah. Scott's got a question here. Do you expect more meta shifts than usual in a 3-color set? Since at first people might not realize they can not play 3 colors and just play 2, and it has to change, and then, yeah, land pick orders changing. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think there's going to be a pretty big shift in a week or two. Just like we normally, actually, I was going to say like we normally have, but there's some sets where the shift just doesn't happen. It's just like, okay, well, maybe there's one shift and then things just stay the part for the course. I think AFR was kind of like that. But this one, I imagine there's going to be quite a bit of shifts. Yeah, I think there's enough push and pull. There's enough, like, it's just a complex format. There's a lot of moving parts, right? So I think it would just be hard for that not to happen as information kind of, gets, disseminated and people understand what works. So yes, I think for sure. Yeah, let's move on because I don't want to take too much of our time here. I still want to give some time for this last group activity. But first, pack navigation. So I've got a pack here from one of my drafts. I'm going to send you the 17 lands link. I actually posted it in the Chord-o-class part of the Discord if you want to check that out. But with your group, the same group that we just had, I want you to walk through the first 8 picks of the pack. And this isn't, you don't have to, it's not about who has the best pack deck at the end of the pack or anything like that. It's much more about the conversation. If one person could screen share with the pack, with the rest of the group, with picks off, that would be great. I think it's the best way to do it. Just talking through the principles, keeping in mind some of the stuff we talked about today already, and putting it into practice a little bit. So I'm going to try to, let's see, 15 minutes, I say. That's a little bit short for a pack navigation, I know, but I do want some time to come back and talk about it without going too over time here. So we'll try our best to do this for 15 minutes, and come back if you can right at that quarter after mark, just so we have enough time. But yeah, walk through, talk about the pack. If you don't come to perfect conclusions or consensus of the entire group saying, I want to take this card, don't worry about it. don't linger on one pick for too long. First 8 picks, and then we'll come back. All right, see you soon.
20 minutes later.
Welcome back, everybody. So, really cool draft log. This is one I did just last night. And I think you can navigate this so many different ways, and I'm curious to see how, what sort of, rough consensus people came to. We'll just do, each pick as, group 1, group 2, your thoughts, and yeah, we'll go from there. So why don't we do, just like before, Zach's group first. So I don't know. Did you get a chance to, the person who led the group, did you get a chance to turn the pick off for the first one, or was that spoiled for everybody?
We did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we settled on Jenny Faye. We did make some cases for Cleanup Crew and Sleep with the Fishes, but Jenny Faye, even though it is sort of 3 colors, it's not truly 3 colors. It's flexible. It can be, mono green if it had to be. And I've actually played with it before, and I thought it'd be like very strong, but not totally busted.
Yep.
So I could actually see the case for one of the monocolored uncommons, but like it's also still very good and also super super fun.
Yeah, no, totally.
So
definitely
taking it.
Other group thoughts?
Yeah, we were between like Ginny Faye, Cleanup Crew, Sleep with the Fishes, Murder. We weren't sure between like Sleep with the Fishes and Ginny Faye. There's some consideration for just like shipping a bunch of green cards. Like for shipping a green-white card, we really want to take Ginny Faye here. I haven't had enough experience with Sleep with the Fishes to really like kind of get an idea of how good that card actually is. But
right.
Definitely see the argument for taking a monocolored card to be like maximally open versus Ginny Faye.
And I've been pretty high on the fishes in general.
And I hadn't played with Sleep with the Fishes, but I have liked that kind of blue-white tempo and see why it would be very strong there. The fish tokens have all been very good.
Yeah, it's like so I've liked the card. I've loved the card. But let's just go to my pick here. I did take it here. I think it's just like you don't want to think of like a mini Ravenous Chupacabra, except the 2/2 is a 1/1 unblockable, and you don't actually kill the thing. It's plays not that dissimilarly to that card. So I really, really like fishes. And full disclosure here also, this draft was my first draft after the day 2 17 lands data update. So I had a little bit of influence there, where this is currently the second best uncommon in the set. Straight up. Very, very highly performing. It doesn't shock me that it's performing that well. I wouldn't have guessed that it was exactly that well, but it is very, very good. Ginny Faye, I think, is a totally solid pick too. I think any of these cards are, and we're gonna see a lot of these picks in this draft. Where it's like I think anything here could be reasonable here. I like Ginny Faye. I think I would bias away from Ginny Faye just because, like you guys were saying, it's not exactly a gold card, a 3-color card, but it's not quite a monocolor card. It's not quite a 2. It's more of a 2-color card than not, right? It definitely is a 2-color card, but I think good 1-color card versus 2-color card, like this is exactly what I was talking about before. I tended to prefer the 1-color card. So I started with fishes. I think Cleanup Crew or Ginny Faye or Murder are all perfectly fine starts here. So, yep.
Mike made the good point in our group that it's actually kind of closer to a 1-color card because it's playable in the 2 color pairs that you would pair green with.
Yes.
It's like a 1.5 color card.
1.5, yeah, a little, yeah. and actually, and I don't know. So this is where the data gets a little bit tricky because it's also like early and it's rares. I don't know. Ginny Faye's not performing all that well currently with a reasonable sample. I think she's like 54 game hand win rate or something. So I don't know if that's just like people throwing her, like forcing her. Like this is what's going to happen a lot of the time with these cards, by the way, so far. With gold cards, sorry, I should specify. People are going to take them and potentially want to try to play them in lanes that they shouldn't. So naturally, early on especially, the gold cards are going to be dragged down a little bit, which should actually even tell you any gold card that's doing well is going to be like, you like bump that up even more because people are forcing it and it's still doing really well, right? Similar actually with Ginny Faye might be a thing where it's like, oh, I should just take everything that makes a token maker when that might not be the actual best thing to do. Yeah, Lab Goat.
Yeah, it's probably a little like picking a Pyre Sledge Arsonist, which I've picked that in a deck, and I was like, I'm not actually going to play this because I have no cards that make it good, even though it's a very good card. So it's probably a little bit like that.
Yeah, like the Pyre Sledge Arsonist. That's the 2/2, that the pinger, right? The
2/2.
Yeah, exactly. So early on, you're gonna see these like generically good effects be better, represented better in the stats. Just like good removal spell gives you a creature, Cleanup Crew, Murder. Than these kind of cards. But just something to think about going forward. Okay, so we start that, and of course, our paths are going to change rapidly, wildly. So I'm not expecting you to be in line with what I have done here. I just want think about your path, think about the paths. Like we get to see multiple people's paths. Basically, is what's cool about this. Okay, next pick here. Zach's group thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I think we looked at warm welcome initially, and then also discuss the two, the green and the white uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, hard to read those. And then we sort of agreed that probably while one of the green cards is maybe the correct pick, we would probably all get stuck and the rope would tick down to 3 seconds, and then we would just take strangle.
Yeah. So another one where it's just like, man, there's a few things. So if you take, let's just go back here. Right? Actually, sorry, no, let's hear the other group first, and then I'll give my part.
So I think we agreed that we would probably take the Swooping Protector because it pairs well with our blue card.
Yep. I like that. So if you take Ginny Fey, if you take Ginny Fey, I actually think the pick is a pretty clear libaceous, luxurious libation. I think this card is awesome. I think this is just one of the best uncommons in the set. It's like, so not only is it a token maker, right? That counts, but it's like a fireball / good combat trick / like, okay, so you know when you line up a combat situation where you're like, okay, my opponent has a trick, you line up like, maybe you're like, put, okay, 2 creatures, maybe I can put a third. Libation just blows that out of the water because your opponent's expecting like +2/+2 or +3/+3. You can do like +5 on this thing, or you just fireball them out for like the last 6 points of the damage, or you like, it's good on a lifelinker. I think this card is just,
and it even makes a token for Ginny Fey.
Exactly, it makes a token for Ginny Fey, or I've done this too. 1 mana, ambush the next 3. Or sorry, next one, a 3/1. You know, they attack with their 3 mana 3/1. Sure, 1 mana, kill that thing. Right? Like, you could just do that. I think this card is really, really good. I love me a Strangle too. I think this card's a little bit better though. And yes, I agree, if you take like Sleep with the Fishes here, I think then you take Sweeping Protector. Sweeping Protector is also awesome. I've had a really, really good experience with this card. Legit, like in the last like day or two. I was a bit cold on it before, like a little bit like, it's a little bit low impact, but too much of the time you just get to like nab a creature, you get to eat a creature, and then you have a 2/1 flyer. It's just really, really powerful. So I think these are the 2 best cards in the pack, and you can take either of them based on what you just took. So yeah.
Swooping Protector reminds me of the Nebelgast.
Nebelgast, right? The Intruder.
Yeah.
Yep, totally.
Which was very good.
Agree. All right, moving on to this one.
We just went with like no clear signal, take Nightclubber. It's just super powerful.
Yep. Other group.
Yep.
We also took Nightclubber.
Same.
Yeah, I think this was an easy pick.
Never pass a Nightclubber is next rule of engagement.
Yes,
Right,
exactly.
Engagement.
Yeah, Nightclubber is so insanely good in this format. There's so many X1s. Like, I've killed 4 creatures with this on turn like 4. Like, it's just been like, okay, my opponent will like make a 1/1, make another 1/1. They have like a token maker, and it's just like, all right, sorry, my friend. Also, like, a lot of the times, the cool thing about this card too is a lot of the times a 2/2 is just worth less to you than a card. So like, you just blitz it out and you're just like cantripping -1 to the team and draw a card. And also it's mono, like it's not monocolor. Well, it is monocolor, but it's also 1 pipped. If you like the mode you use more often is 1 pipped, right? So yeah, it's very flexible too. So definitely an easy pick there. All right, next one.
I actually don't remember what we went with there. I think we ended up with the land. No, sorry, that's Meister's here. That's not right. I think we went with Rocco because we were just like, rare that tutors up our other rare. Yeah.
Yep. That's in the Ginny Fey pile. And other group?
I think we took Murder, but we also agreed if we had started with Ginny Fey, then Rocco would be a great choice. So.
Yes, I think so too. That is what I think that's great. So this is really interesting, right? So we've kind of taken 2 very different paths just in the cards we've taken, but like kind of categorically different paths of one group and myself have gone to the take the monocolor cards. Maybe we'll figure it out later. One group's taking the take the gold cards. Now I'm in a lane. Let's see if this works out. I'm not sure which one is like on average going to be better. My gut says the take the monocolor cards, see what works out, or see what comes to us is the slightly better path. But it could turn out, and obviously it's not even like this is better than this, but what you're giving up or what you're adding or what you're looking to get out of this path where you take the Ginny Fey is kind of a high roll where you're like, okay, I take the Ginny Fey, I take, I didn't take another gold card or Rocco, a 3-color card, and you're like, well, this is open, my lane's going to be fantastic and probably better than if I started in that monocolored path, right? But if you don't do that, it's like, okay, well, maybe you can end up with some like a really messy draft. So it's really this push and pull of like power versus openness. And my gut feeling is it's just like these cards are also powerful but also open. And not to say that like I still think this is a good path you took, right? With the Rocco and going to that. It's just really interesting as the format pans out, figuring out exactly like sussing out and getting that gut check of like, well, yeah, this is the kind of start you onto your drafts more often than not. So we take Murder or we take Rocco. Next pick. This one's where it gets interesting too. Thoughts on this one? Maybe the Rocco group first, or the Ginny Faye group.
I think this one is where we ended up going. We were, especially after taking our second like 3-colored rare, we were like, we should just get some lands out of the way, because we're going to end up being lots of colors, and we're probably going to have to sacrifice some picks here for mana, even though Warm Welcome obviously would be quite good here. And I don't think we wanted to stretch into blue for the Magpie.
Yeah, and other group?
So I think we talked about taking Lagrella here. We talked about taking the land and Backup Agent. I think Mike suggested Backup Agent, and my reservation about that was that I really want to be playing black cards now. Like, we first picked Sleep with the Fishes, and we haven't seen any blue. So I want to play the black cards, and I was like, well, okay, so the white card doesn't actually pair that well with the black cards unless you're playing, like, Esper, right? But I don't know how true that is, because I know that you took the Backup Agent. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
So I'm gonna start with the other group first. I think if you're concerned about your mana, I actually think you might just take Exhibition Magician.
Yeah.
Because it's both the mana fixer and it gives you a token, right, for Ginny Faye. So it's kind of plays double duty there. For the other group, I did take Backup Agent. So a few thoughts here. A lot of thoughts here, but I don't want to go too long. We still have 3 more picks to do. But Backup Agent, I think, is really good. I think I had this inkling that I was like afraid. I was afraid to like go too deep and have too much of a hot take before the data came out. But I mentioned in the last podcast when I was talking about blue-white, I was like, I think you really want Backup Agent if you're blue-white, or if you're touching, or even if you're like touching black a little bit, because there's like some, it's like an okay body, like a value creature body. You can like buy it back or fake your own death. Like, it kind of plays okay with that. But the curve outs, or just any game where you have Backup Agent into a card that cares about a counter in blue-white or blue or white cards, and the ones you don't, has felt massive. And I was like, okay, this card actually, I think, is something. It's much better than your average Iron Shell Beetle. I also think that like there's things going on with the sizing of creatures where the counter matters a little bit more than usual, where things are like pretty flatly statted, and it's just like the counter pushes a little more damage than it might usually, or you put it on a flyer, there's more flyers than usual. So a few things in there, and then the data surpassed my expectations of where I thought the card might fall, and it's currently, again, smallish sample size. I say smallish because we have thousands and thousands of games already with games in hand, but it's currently sitting at like the 3rd or 4th top common overall in the set, which is just wild. I wouldn't have expected that, and we're gonna see. We'll kind of reconcile with that why that is exactly as we draft a little bit more. But again, this was my first draft after looking at the data. I'm like, I'm just gonna trust the data a little bit here. Take the monocolor card. I think this has this has potential to be really, really good. And the Duncan, your thoughts on, well, I've got black cards, I don't want to pair them with white cards. That would have been my thought too. And then I've drafted a few decks in the past. Here, I'll just show you. I've drafted a few decks in the past little while. A little while as in like the past 18 hours. Where I was just like, look at this deck here. I was just base black, white. And it was fine. Like, I had a few red cards, I had a few blue cards, but I didn't feel any tension with being black white. And actually the black and white cards kind of paired well together. Now, you're not always going to get, this is kind of analogous to the black red deck I showed you earlier, where there was just good black and white cards, where there's, that other deck, there's just good black and red cards. I didn't have to stretch my mana because I had a seat that gave me 3 Raffine's Informants, 2 Overseers, and 3 Girder Goons. You're going to need good monocolor cards to be able to do that. But I do think that there's enough, you can have spots where you're just like, I'm this enemy killer pair, which that's not intended, but it's kind of okay to do that. So yes, I think there is thoughts to don't take a white card after the black cards. Don't have those thoughts cloud too much of your decision, right? Just like make it as maybe a tiebreaker, but I don't think it's like this like thing where it's like I can't take a white card after I want to play my black cards, is my thought.
That's
Yeah.
super helpful.
To add a little data on that, I was joking in the Discord the other day about how Orzhov had a 100% win percentage, but only one game had been recorded on 70 lands. But now, I mean, it's still a tiny sample size relative, but at 41 games, it's still at 78%.
Right, yeah. It's
half that might be Alex, so, but...
That's true. That deck, I 7-0'd with that deck, so you never know.
So it's not going to have a 78 win percentage overall, but that's enough to make me go like, well, it's not, nothing.
Yeah, I did notice that the black cards just pair very well with the white cards. Like, Fake Your Own Death plays really well with Inspiring Overseer and with Backup Agent. Like, Backup Agent, it, like, helps your agent trade up, and then you get a counter on something else, and then it just comes back, and, like, you can sacrifice the Backup Agent. I don't know, it played way smoother than I would have expected, is what it comes down to. So let's keep going. We're a little bit over time here, so I don't want to take too much time here. I'll go with picks on here for the rest of it, because everybody else knows what I picked here. But Zach, what did you...
Civil Servant, good 2-drop.
Yep.
Wants tokens, and we already want tokens.
Agree. And Duncan's group?
We were between Lackey and Nuisance, and we discussed a little. We said maybe Civil Servant, but I don't know. We were mostly talking between Lackey and Nuisance, if I remember.
Yeah, so I like Nat Lackey. I like Nuisance a little bit less. I think it's an okay card. It's like a one-of kind of card I want. Or, like, Nuisance, the doesn't get too deep into Casualty because it's a whole other bag of worms. But I found the Casualty cards are very good when you have a Casualty deck, and they're kind of medium otherwise. So, like, Nuisance is a card I'm like, oh, I really, really want it once I have the Court Officials and the Lackeys. Less so like a speculative card, but it could be fine. It's not the worst card to take here. I think Civil Servant is the best card in this pack. And it pairs well with the Backup Agent and the Swooping Protector. This is the example, just to go back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like, I don't think there's a good enough monocolored card here for me. I think Lackey is fine, but I haven't taken a blue card in a while. So now I take a gold card. That's my thought here. And, as we go on through the draft. And then here, I took Throng. You could take Regulator, I think, too. I think that's totally fine. I think I've been really impressed with Throng. I think just getting 3 Throngs has felt really strong. As long as your opponent doesn't have Nightclubbers in their deck. That's kind of a nightmare. You spend all this mana for your 3/1 ult to die. I think Regulator would be a perfectly fine thing too here, but my thought here is that I can take a good monocolor card over a gold card, so I will do so. And we get to this. This is a pretty easy pick. So, I think I don't exactly know, who knows how the draft will pan out if we take in one path or the other, but I thought this was a good draft to go over. There's a lot of paths, and here, sorry, just to get back to the draft quickly, this is where I'm like, hey, I take a Celestial Regulator here. This is probably, instead of taking a Regulator early in the draft, and then hoping blue-white is open, I just go, okay, Regulator is 9th pick at Wield. That might imply that I'm going to get more Regulator-style cards, right? Or just like, more Regulators or more cards that play well with Regulator. So yeah, this is where I more want to take the gold cards, is my thought. Anyways, before we pack up, any last thoughts on this draft or anything we've talked about today?
I noticed that your final deck has 2 Disdainful Stroke main deck.
Ah, yeah.
And I would love to know about that.
Yeah, so I ended up in this like pretty heavy Esper build, like just like all these lands came to me free. Again, this is another like, don't take the lands too highly, kind of backing that up, because if the lane is open where you need the lands, they'll come to you some amount of the time. Not always, but some amount of the time. So you get some of that equity where it's like, okay, I took some of these in the middle of the pack, but then some of them I got late and I was able to play a few more black cards than I normally would. Sorry, but to talk about Disdainful Stroke. Yeah, it's a card that I've been kind of testing out. Like, the theory here is that if you are kind of like counterspells in Crimson Vow and blue-white, where with like Syncopate and Geist Slay Snare, if you're getting on board early with evasive creatures, you kind of just want counterspells, because you go like, I'm getting on board, I've got a 2 and a 3, maybe play a cheap flyer, and I've got quite a few cheap flyers here. You kind of just want them to not be able to resolve a really good top end card or a really impactful card, and because you kind of you're already on board and you're already pressuring them, and you don't need to cast spells to get things out of the way because your creatures are evasive, so you can use your mana to hold up mana on your turn. Disdainful Stroke becomes pretty good because it's kind of exactly what you want. Like, counterspells are good when you're planning to be ahead on board early. So yeah, I was testing it out. I was actually looking. This wasn't part of. I didn't play the Disdainful Strokes because of the data, but I looked after and I was like, oh, Disdainful Strokes actually performing like not terribly. It's like 58 game in hand win rate currently, which is not amazing, but it's pretty decent for the card, right? So I'm going to try it out a little bit more. It was really good for me in my games. Like, I felt very, very safe when I had the card, and I countered some really good stuff. So, yeah, I was a fan. It was good.
Where do you put Disdainful Stroke versus the other 2-mana counterspell, the counter unless 2 with casualty 1?
I think that card's good. I think that card is better than Disdainful Stroke. I actually think that card is actively good, and we probably have, as a community, been underrating it. This is another one, like, this is where 17 lands, like, is such a great tool, because I had an inkling that it was good, and I wanted to play it more, and I probably would have gotten around to playing it more naturally if 17 lands, didn't update so quickly. But now that we've actually seen it, I think it's actually the top performing blue common, or the second top.
That's
performing.
the one with casualty.
Sorry, yeah, I should say it's 2 mana casualty counter target spell unless they pay 2, and then you can sack a creature to copy it, right, to pay 4.
It's currently second to Echo Inspector.
That makes
the
sense.
2/3 flyer, but it Disdainful Stroke. It's less than a percentage point better than Disdainful Stroke. So they're both good. It's definitely better, but.
Let's just take a look at this card quickly, just so we people know what we're talking about here. It is Make This Spear. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So this is the thing about this card is it's a decent 2. You're gonna counter their 2, and also people are tapping out pretty consistently into the late game, like playing their family fixer cards, 6 mana cards, double spelling. I've just found that every time I've had this card in my deck, which isn't, I think I've only had it once, but it was good every time I had it, and I faced it multiple times and I've been like, yeah, that's really annoying, like like they got a really good tempo swing there where they get to counter my 6 mana spell and play a 4-drop too. So yeah,
when people are exiling those family fixers and they have a 6-drop in their hand and you can just sit there on 2 mana,
that's
feels
huge.
Great.
Absolutely huge. Yeah.
You can also use your backup agent to really blow them out, even if they have 3 up. And then you use the sacrifice. That's where I like that card too.
Yes. I've been playing a little bit more of that card. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Okay. So I think we had a pretty comprehensive discussion here. Went a little bit long. Sorry for that, everybody. But yeah, I'll give everybody one last chance crack at a question. But I will just say shout out to Patrick. Once again, I always have to shout out Patrick. Patrick helps me plan these classes, plan the lesson plans. He's the education consultant that helps me, I bounce up ideas off him. He gives me some ideas. Really, really great. Really great partner. If you have any education consulting work that you need done, or anybody, check him out. I'll put his email in the link to this video. And yeah, I'd highly recommend anybody, shouting out to him if you need to work in that space. He's been awesome. One last chance for questions, but if not, we'll say see you next time.
We had one thing that we kicked around in the first group discussion and never really settled on a rule of engagement, but we were saying that before the set came out, there's a lot of talk about there not being many good 2-drops, but it seems like there actually are more than were expected.
Mm-hmm.
How are you saying, oh, these 2-drops are good, let's take them all, or saying like there are lots of good 2-drops, I don't have to prioritize them because something will be available?
I still think I'm taking them pretty highly. So let's just go through some of them first. I don't love Socialite. Body Dropper's good. Backup Agent's good. Silver Servant's good. I even like Broker's Veteran. Custodian's one that's really surprised me. I've actually really liked this card. I think it trades up really well. If you're attacking, you don't really care that much that it comes in tapped. I mean, it matters, but it hasn't mattered that much to me. Fairy Vandal's good. Yeah.
Shout out to Duncan for calling that one in our last class.
Yes, definitely. Yes, definitely. Shout out to Duncan for sure. I agree with that. You you nailed it. I think that, yeah, there are a decent amount of good 2-drops as we're looking at it. Yeah, I mean, I still am taking them. I still think I want a good number of 2-drops, right? I'm still prioritizing them. There's still going to be drafts where I end up short on them. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been deprioritizing them just yet, but that might change.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, yeah, thank you so much, everybody. We will we'll reconvene next week, potentially. Might be the week after. I'll shout out just some. I'll put in the Discord, see if anybody wants 1 week or the other. If there's some opinions on where just people scheduling and what works for them. But yeah, thanks so much everybody for joining. It was a nice, long, good discussion, And yeah, feel free as always to reach out if you have any additional questions, and we'll see you next time.